The conversation on UFOs, UAPs, and non-human intelligence has long been shaped by experience, speculation, and secrecy. What's missing is a coherent approach, one that separates data from interpretation and evidence from belief. Humanity now stands at a threshold. Encountering a non-human reality is not only a scientific mystery, it's a civilizational challenge. We must move beyond ideology and secrecy toward a science of contact, grounded in evidence, methods, and shared human values. The Human Institute is building that foundation. The Investigating Non-Human Intelligence series is the first public multidisciplinary forum dedicated to developing the scientific and ethical foundations for researching our human encounter with non-human intelligence. The series convenes leading scientists, philosophers, and field investigators to explore new approaches, methods, and emerging data and findings to ultimately generate breakthrough discoveries in non-human intelligent phenomena. These one-hour presentations bring forward serious work by serious people, charting a roadmap for a new science capable of understanding and managing the unknown responsibly before it manages us. We invite scholars, experiencers, and all who seek clarity to join us. It's time to rise above speculation and take a deliberate step toward a grounded, evidence-based response to the existence of non-human intelligence.
Hello, good morning for me. Hello to you wherever you may be joining us in the world. I know people are joining us from all over the place. And thanks for being here today. My name is Chuck Schreiner. I'm the project manager for this Investigating Non-Human Intelligence series of talks presented in partnership between the Human Institute and UAP Med. We're focused on serious research into UAP and non-human intelligence. Today's talk is from Dr. Massimo Teodorani. It's the fourth in our series. The first three presentations were about laying the groundwork, about questioning how science can expand to investigate NHI, what counts as evidence, and how we might responsibly apply scientific inquiry into a subject that's often been misunderstood or dismissed. This next series of talks, now we're shifting. We're shifting more directly into the research itself. We've laid the foundation for methods and theory. And we're now beginning to ask, how do we learn about the nature of non-human intelligence itself? How do we go about exploring it? This is not something that we're familiar with looking at. People often ask me why we're so focused on so heavily on academic research. And it's a fair question. Ufology is a messy space. It's unruly. There's a lot of noise. And what these researchers bring is discipline and method and restraint. And we need that to build credibility broadly. I mean, that's the challenge. These are serious scientists applying serious rigor into a subject that until fairly recently was the stuff of science fiction. They're using the tools and method that science has developed to separate fact from fiction and applying them when they haven't been applied before. By highlighting their work, we're hoping to encourage other scholars to step up and do the same. That's really the goal. Over time, that's the kind of work that builds credibility. It's inevitable, frankly. That's the math. Good research builds credibility. And as credibility grows, it creates space, it opens doors. Citizen scientists, regular people, lay people, many of whom have important observations and experiences, gain more influence when their accounts are supported by careful, credible research. I mean, that's the point. So from my perspective, the central question is no longer whether NHI is present. To me, I'm past that point. The more important question is, how do we respond? And what's its nature? What's its intention? And just why are they here? What is this? And these aren't trivial questions. They're not something that I can speculate and come up with an answer. There are no easy answers. We can only say that their presence alone suggests a physics that we don't yet possess. We don't know their goals. We don't know the nature of their minds. And getting closer to those answers will require creative, careful use of the scientific tools we already have, and likely the development of new ones. That's what we're trying to encourage. One last note before I turn things over to Ted Rowe, the head of the UAP Med. The Human Institute is also hosting a UAP Summit on February 7th and 8th. This is an extraordinary lineup of speakers, congressional leaders, key researchers, experts from media and law. It's just an expansive group of really amazing people that are going to be talking and presenting at this summit. You can find more information at humaninstitute.org. So I want to encourage people to take a look at that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ted to introduce Dr. Ted Orani and today's lecture. Oh, and after Massimo speaks, feel free to submit questions through Slido. Maybe put that up. Yeah, thank you. The Slido feature that will accompany the talk. And we'll have some Q&A afterwards. Scan this QR code or go to slido.com and enter this hashtag to ask questions. And with that, my friend Ted, take it away, bud.
Thank you, Chuck. My name is Ted Rowe. Today's speaker, Dr. Massimo Teodorani, is a Northern Italian physicist and obtained his laureate degree in astronomy, his PhD in stellar physics at the University of Bologna. As a researcher at the astronomical observatories of Bologna and Naples, and later at the INAF radio telescope in Medicina, he has been involved in research on many types of explosive stellar phenomena, such as supernova, nova, eruptive protostars, and high-mass close binary stars, and more recently in the search for extrasolar planets and extraterrestrial intelligence within the SETI project. Dr. Teodorani subsequently taught physics as a lecturer at the universities of Bologna, Rome, and Torino. Among his varied research interests, there is an active involvement in the study of anomalous aerial phenomena. In 2010, Dr. Teodorani was invited to address the European Parliament on the subject of UFOs. Massimo was the lead scientific advisor for the 2000-2001 EMBLA research project at Hesdalen, Norway. He has conducted on-site research in several known locations of UAP, including Arizona, USA, and Ontario, Canada. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Massimo Teodorani.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you very much, all of you, for inviting me, and my welcome to all the listeners. I hope they will be interested, and I will try to be as much objective as possible. First of all, we all know what is the strangeness that we are observing in our skies, especially after the Tic Tac incident and important peer-reviewed works like this one by Kevin Knuth of some years ago, where we can see that scientists have recognized, probably for the first time, that UAPs have a very peculiar characteristics like extreme acceleration, inertia-free turns, non-sonic booms, hovering without lifting, a very high luminosity, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and I will tell you why this is very important for measurements, and electromagnetic and sonar anomalies. So there are physical challenges here, okay? Because there are things that are unexplained by conventional physics, apparently. So we don't know if these are tricks where conventional physics is hidden, or if there is a so-called new physics. The best way to know that is certainly to make a physics model, mathematical models, but before that, to find out a way to collect data in the same way in which we collect data of celestial objects, namely photons in all possible wavelength, because this is the only data that we can obtain. Certainly, witness cases can guide us sometimes when there is no CGI, when there is no fakes or hoaxes. But what is important is that we are able to collect the data. Clearly, it's much more difficult here because it's not like stars, where we don't have fixed coordinates in the sky, so the phenomenon is erratic. But there are places in the world in which the phenomenon is occurring very often. So we can use those places as laboratory areas where to place our sensors and measurement instruments. Unexplained by physics, we have G-force survival. Clearly, there are Gs that a military pilot can resist up to 9G, but what we are observing is something up to 5,000 G or over. There is a drag reduction underwater also. We don't know about the energy source for the luminosity. There is sometimes no sounds heard, okay? So the main question here, at least in my opinion, after studying the phenomenon and trying to do research, physics research on it, are these ones. Are UAP phenomena pure plasma, especially when we see them at night, like nocturnal lights, like they were classified by Dr. J. Allen Hynek many years ago? Or are they flying machines surrounded by a plasma sheet? And also in this case, I'm speaking about the luminous cases, because as an astronomer, I am interested in situations in which I can measure their photons and not only photograph of the phenomenon that is sometimes seen also at daylight. So which of the two? Well, I think that both cases are important. And after an introduction about number 2 here, I will speak mostly about plasma, pure plasma, and I will explain why, in my opinion, they are unexpectedly very important for the search of non-human intelligence. First of all, I have to say that I've been submitting papers and publishing also on the Academy of Science of Ukraine about possible propulsion mechanism. I already spoke about this in 2 months ago at the SWAPS, and I'm revising a paper now that I submitted to a scientific journal. So there are several papers, peer-reviewed paper by Mark Rodeger, by Bruce Maccabee, by Jacques Vallée, and by Auguste Messen, who are all scientists, who speak about possible magnetoplasma dynamic flying machines. Namely, like this is one of those cases, high luminous object. And how is this luminosity produced? The only way that can be produced is through plasma, named incandescent particles, let's call so ions and electrons that are trapped by a very strong magnetic field. A magnetic field is confining substantially the plasma, that is substantially the air of our atmosphere, and vector this plasma in several directions as a thruster substantially. And it's possible to reach very high speeds with this. Several papers have been published. Also, I am working on this in a parallel way. And what can we say? That we know the physics about that clearly, and we are applying the same kind of physics with the tokamaks, namely when we try to create nuclear fusion. Okay, we need a big magnetic field, very big, from around 50 Tesla to trap the plasma, okay, and maintain very high temperature, okay. So we also know how to do that. So this is known physics. There is also other possibility, but before telling this, I can tell you that here, with this kind of possible propulsion, we have incredibly high speed okay, that bring up to 1 million G theoretically. Of course, whoever is a pilot inside this machine would be squeezed, practically disintegrated by the incredible force of acceleration, so no one could resist. Maybe if there are drones of some kind and made of particular material, like could be superconductors, for instance, where it's possible to to liberate a lot of electricity that would produce in their turn a strong magnetic field. They could resist, maybe, but not a pilot inside. So this is a big dilemma. Well, this would happen unless we have something else that is alternated to this magnetoplasma thrust propulsion, or alternated in the sense that it's dual mode according to what they have to do, these pilots, if the pilots are aboard. And it means, now I will not get in depth here because someone else have already done, but we could manipulate space-time geometry according to the relativity theory. There is important work by Miguel Alcubierre, who said that it's possible to create a warp drive substantially to encapsulate the pilot inside the bubble, where nothing happens, even if you are accelerating at incredible speeds. In the reference frame of that bubble, nothing happens. It's instead, what happens is that you manipulate space-time, you are contracting space-time in front, and you are expanding space-time behind, so that you move the space-time. Our properties are very interesting because clearly it's well known in terms of theoretical physics, but what is missing differently from the magnetoplasma dynamic propulsion is the engineering. We already started engineering magnetoplasma propulsion, but we do not know how to manipulate space-time, okay? For instance, I found among the many fakes that you can see online, something that might show one of these behavior. You see, suddenly an object is jumping up. So they would not experience any acceleration or inertial forces, okay? The problem is only one. Okay, we know the physics, but we don't know the engineering. And we don't know how to obtain the enormous quantity of energy that is necessary to do that, which is negative energy density that is extracted from the quantum vacuum. To make you an example, if you wanted to open a hole or move practically a mouse through a bubble that is only 10 centimeters wide, for I would say 15 seconds, we should use as much energy as the rest mass of the moon. So it's incredibly big energy, and no one knows how they do to extract it, okay? This is the biggest problem. The hypothesis is that they could use dual mode hypothesis for structured flying objects. And I will tell you later why I think the plasma mode is important, and also telling that in both cases we can obtain data using measurement instruments. The plasma mode is important because it would involve very luminous objects, which have been indeed documented in seminal works like by Jacques Vallée in 1998. There are magnitudes of luminosities that are from 100 megawatt up to 1 gigawatt. They are luminosities that were indirectly deduced. But in this case, we want to measure precisely, calculating the distance with the triangulation methods or by radar, and measuring with the SEMOS sensors all the photons that are incoming. In the warp mode, I will tell you there is also other methods of measurements. In both cases, there are different manifestations. In particularly, the warp mode would not necessarily show very high luminosity. So high luminosity is something that is typical of the plasma mode, and I did concentrate my attention on this science planning about plasma dynamic propulsion, because as an astronomer, I know how to make a certain kind of analysis, namely, as I will tell next week at the UAP summit, when the object is very luminous, we are able to make high resolution spectroscopy. The highest is the resolution, so the better are the details that you can obtain from a wavelength to another, and the longer exposure time we have to use to catch the photons with a reasonable signal to noise ratio. So the quality of data is absolutely important. But if the object is very luminous, it's possible that we can obtain high resolution spectra. And with high resolution spectra, if there is a strong magnetic field really inside the plasma, we can detect that directly from the spectra, from the so-called Zeeman effect. A Zeeman effect is characteristic because it splits spectral lines in two parts. And from the measurement in wavelength of the separation, we can calculate exactly the intensity, the strength of the magnetic field, so that we can compare this intensity with theoretical models. And not only that, but we can correlate this kind of measurement with other measurement with electromagnetic instruments like spectrum analyzers, magnetometers, gravimeters, and what else, that are taken this measurement simultaneously with spectroscopy. So this is what I'm doing normally, because I want to enjoy in this research, but I can enjoy only when I know that I can obtain data. And I know that with very luminous objects like plasma types, we can obtain high resolution spectrum sometimes in a few seconds. But if we have a weaker object and we have a pan tilt zoom camera that is tracking the object, and so also the spectrograph, we can track the object and even for several minutes, okay, if the object doesn't make mad movement. Okay, so there are several theories here. I will speak in detail about the pure plasma theory and two theories that are speaking about a machine that is flying in the sky. In particular, the number two could have plasma around, as I told, because it's confined by a magnetic field. If there is a lot of plasma, the higher is the density of the plasma and the temperature, the more the solid object that is inside will be completely invisible. Okay, it's like it is surrounded by a luminous cloud. Okay, so we don't know what is inside, but if we take some measurements, we can unmask this thing from a pure plasma thing. So then a machine with a warp bubble as an alternative propulsion mechanism for a flying machine of that kind. Let's assume that we have several sensors that I mentioned before. I will mention more here, and let's see how these three different theories can be deduced, proved by by the use of sensors that we assume to use these sensors simultaneously. And some of these sensors are already being used since at least 2 years by the Galileo project. We have an all sky camera, which is useful for all of this theory, a pan-tilt zoom camera for tracking the object, which is useful for all, a forward-looking infrared, same, a high-speed camera, which is very important, because it can test two things: fast movement, fast variation of luminosity and color, and namely every 1,000th of seconds, for instance, or using wide-angle mode, fast movements in the sky. In fact, this is what we expect by machines with a warp bubble that make sudden movement in the sky. So they appear at a place and reappear in another. High resolution spectrography clearly is very important if we have a magnetoplasma machine, but irrelevant for other theories. Magnetometer is important, but it's important to tell people that the magnetometer doesn't measure the intrinsic magnetic field strength of this object, but it measures the effect at the distance at which the object is, that is caused near where we are. And you consider that the magnetic intensity decreases with the inverse of the cube of the intensity. So it's not intrinsic, but it's just the effect on us of this perturbation. But the only way to measure intrinsically the magnetic field is spectroscopical or with the polarimetry. So we have a radar, clearly, which can be very important with the magnetoplasma, because in this case, we can have sometimes a stealth effect. Sometimes the object can disappear due to the plasma complex mechanism that happen, and sometimes it could create, according to the movement of the vectors of the plasma, it can create intermittent radar tracks. Okay, and same with the warp bubble. Microwave radio spectrum analyzers are important because machine with magnetoplasma are expected to give strong spike of microwave radiation. A gravimeter is very important for the warp bubble theory, because you have alteration of the gravitational field. But in addition to that, there are other effects that can be measured. Particle detector means high energy particle is important with machine with a magnetoplasma, because if high energy particles of this plasma are accelerated by the field lines, force lines of the magnetic field, we would have a so-called non-thermal radiation, otherwise called synchrotron radiation, which would produce high energy particles. Okay, so we can measure that. Assume that you use all these instruments at the same time, well, we could obtain a lot of results. And EEG, I will show you later how important it can be, because measuring the mind, what happens in the brain, could show very interesting things that I will show you. A laser, same thing, stimulation by laser of a pure plasma, if that plasma has particular characteristics that I will show you. But a laser could be also useful to aim at one of these possible warp bubble machine, because it might be bent by the gravitational field. And not only that, but we could have gravitational lensing of the field stars in the sky, comparing the same field of the stars without a UAP, and with UAP we could see gravitational lensing, and we could obtain very important data. So this is only to show what is the protocol that we want to use. We already know what we are going to do, but it's not only a wishful thinking, it's also the result of feasibility calculations, which are very important. The most important thing is the signal to noise ratio, the quality of the data, and the fact that data are well calibrated. So we have to do a lot of calculations before making the measurement to decide if some measurement is worth or not. So there is a lot of work before. So here, the only thing that is missing is the money. It's fundamental. And as I will show you, this is very important for fundamental physics. So this case of the two machines is a manifestation of non-human intelligence, because it's supposed that some exogenous pilots are piloting them, okay, unless they come from some skunk works of our planet. We cannot exclude that. But the other one is another form of non-human intelligence, as so-called plasma life. What is plasma life? I will discuss in detail about that. But before doing that, another methodological consideration, so stressing the fact that if we use astronomy-like methodologies using a specific sensor, we can obtain important data that can be repeated by other scientists in case to study the proper physical properties of UAP. We assume that we have to monitor multi-wavelength and multi-mode sensors using to observe these UAPs, okay? And the most important thing is that what is important is not to obtain static, images of the object or static spectra, but we can understand the physics of this object only when we see how the physical parameters that are measured by all these instruments, how they vary, how they change with time, and sometimes with space. So from variation of this parameter with time, we understood the physical mechanism of astrophysical objects like Cepheid variable stars, close binary, high mass binary stars with a neutron star, or black hole component, or quasars, okay? If we didn't study well the variability of the parameters that we measure with our telescopes and sensors, we wouldn't understand the physical mechanism. The same thing, we can do the same thing with UAPs at the condition that we are lucky enough to catch them. But we could amplify this possibility if we use automatic measurement station that is working 24 hours a day, okay? And something like that has been operational with Project Esdalen, and still now, with which I have been collaborating for a long time, and above all with Galileo Project Observatory, okay? So I published a technical peer review paper about this, showing something of my project and calculations. A fundamental question for physics. What do we observe of UAPs in general? Well, we observe luminosity up to 30,000 megawatt or more, sometimes, only sometimes, but those sometimes could be very precious to understand a lot about their mechanism, if it's a propulsion mechanism. We know about the color radar signature, radio brightness, particle emission, speed, and huge acceleration. We are asking if there is a correlation between these parameters and magnetic field strength that is more than 10 Tesla and more than 1000 Tesla. Huge. It's something like 1 billion Gauss, okay, if you use other measurement unit. So if we consider that this, the expected magnetic field of this plasma dynamic machine in particular is at least 50 Tesla, well, we can say this is not a natural phenomenon at all, because we already know that the natural phenomena like ball lightning have produced a magnetic field that is from 1,000 to 10,000 times weaker. Okay, so it's a discriminant. Okay, so we want to see how the physical parameter are changing together to understand the general physical mechanism. Then we have I will go faster here. We have different characteristics according if you have a pure plasma or a solid object with a plasma sheet around, created by a magnetoplasma engine. We have different spectral signature, different thermal signature. We have instability in pure plasmas versus stability. Also, in one case, we have erratic motion. In the other case, we have linear ballistic motion, or regime of motion. And the magnetic signature in natural plasma is much, much less than what is expected by a magnetoplasma dynamic flying machine. I don't go into detail here because I don't want to steal more time, but let's enter into pure plasma balls and into this very exotic thing. As I said, plasma is an ionized state of matter composed of electrons and ions, and they make 99% of the visible universe. There are situations like ball lightning that it's very little plasma spherical, not only spherical, but mostly spherical phenomena, and they appear in several forms. They can be triggered by natural phenomena like atmospheric electricity or piezoelectricity from the rocks. When rocks are crashing together, quartz underground is crashing, especially during earthquake, you have emission of voltage in the atmosphere, which can ionize the atmosphere and could trigger this kind of light in the atmosphere. But we don't know yet how is it possible that these little phenomena are self-contained, because something that is triggered by voltage is heat, and heat tends to expand very quickly. Okay, instead we have phenomena that are lasting many minutes, and in Sdal, Norway, they can last up to 2 hours. Okay, what is the confining mechanism of that? So this is the biggest mystery of physics. And now we enter into the hot aspect, coherence. Some plasmas exhibit a complex collective behavior. I mean, it's particles. It seems like a self-organized organism and coherence, okay? So much that some scientists from Russia and from Germany in 2007 did computer simulation associating it with a space experiment aboard the Mir, old Russian spacecraft, which showed that in particular conditions, a plasma, which is subnuclear particles, when it's immersed in fine dust particles, when fine dust particles are immersed in a plasma, they suddenly acquire electric charges, they form a crystalline structure, which can self-replicate and behaves and evolve and store information, displaying behaviors that are almost identical to living systems, namely to the DNA. And this is very shocking because it was an article published on a new journal of physics. And after that, everyone is starting to think about so-called weird life. Now I go to the point, consciousness. If there is a plasma that can sustain this kind of a sort of quantum coherence, namely particles that are kind of entangled together, okay? And there are these kind of plasmas, like called plasmons. If you have this quantum coherence, they could support consciousness like phenomena. How? I will show you very briefly. Before that, I can tell you field observation have been done repeatedly, luminous sphere in Esdalen and Norway, and in similar regions of the world, including your country, like a Brown Mountain in North Carolina, also the Cape Fear River in North Carolina, the Yakima somewhere in your United States, Joplin. There are several places in the United States where these kind of phenomena are reoccurring, okay? So, just to remember that Project Sdalen obtained a pioneering work thanks to Professor Erling Strand, starting since 1984. I've been collaborated with him and his colleagues, and he was witnessing, and they're still witnessed now in Norway, anomalous phenomena like flashes, light orbs of several colors, shapes, and sometimes daylight objects. There is the strangeness of sometimes you see structured objects like flying machines in the sky in a place where you see only plasma lights, similar kind of natural phenomena. What is there any correlation between the two? Well, we don't know, but I will tell you later what I might think. They were able to make measurement oscillating and magnetic and radio signals, intermittent radar recordings, and there was also a reaction to a laser beam. And this is very important because I will speak about that in a possible experiment that I am going to propose. Later, there have been several stations, monitoring stations, like Blue Box and the White Box. Two observatories have been used and are being used, in particular the Blue Box now has new cameras, thanks to the work by Rainer Heisetel and Magnus Holm. They did wonderful work, and this is excellent. And I will show you a very recent video of 10 days ago. VLF measurements have demonstrated, thanks to some French and Greek geophysicists, that the ground is strongly electrified, okay? So there is something that is coming from the ground. In fact, there is a lot of copper, there is probable quartz or something, so something is probably triggering this, the natural part of the phenomenon, so to say. Then much work has been done by my colleague and myself. We took photos, we saw shape changes, ejection of a secondary sphere, calculated the luminosity of one of those balls, 20 kilowatt, little, but we knew the distance, and so we were able to make a calculation with a reasonable error. And other kind of objects, because we don't have there the only one kind of object. Then we were able to monitor the light variation of the phenomenon in high speed, in this case 1/30th of second, but we want to do something that is 1000 more highly time resolved, and spectra, or also VLF signal with Doppler effect. And this has been published on many years ago on the Journal of Scientific Exploration. So what you see up, it's the processed version by a German computer scientist Henning Kirsten, with whom I have been collaborated, and he has enhanced a very good work that was done by German engineer Rainer Heiseltl. And so it shows a typical phenomenon of this kind, how it is moving very close to the ground, okay? And this has been seen in several other places of the world, okay? At this point, people is wondering, okay, we have been speaking about UAPs, UFOs, about ETH or something. We want to put a 24-hour station to measure, but I'm wondering, does the UAP phenomenon occur without a witness? Or the witness is important for the UAP phenomenon, okay? So are we driven by the ETH, by the belief in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, or UAP are something more exotic than we ever, and earthly than we ever thought? Well, it's like in this comics, the guy thinks it's raining, but no, it's not raining, it's something else. Or like in this case, that you see two ways to see the same thing, but you don't see the true thing, okay? So we have to try to open our mind a bit more, okay? And don't create preconceived belief systems, because these belief systems can bring sometimes to disasters, okay? So the most important thing is to make hypotheses, even speculations, because if the speculations are logical, we are allowed to them, but then we have to prove or disprove. And the only way to do that is using sensors, like I told before. So there are three hypotheses. Plasma life has some form, in this hypothesis, of consciousness due to the fact that the quantum coherent plasma, okay, behaves like a brain. And I will tell you better later. There is another hypothesis through which this light phenomenon, this plasma, pure plasma, is a quantum phenomenon and is able to communicate with a human witness by the quantum entanglement mechanism. Like if the phenomenon itself and our brain is only one thing. And like quantum physicists would say, they are described by only one wave function. And there is another hypothesis: the light phenomenon could be able to insert coded messages in the human brainwave via quantum effect that trigger physical, classical states inside the brain. So can a plasma become a life form? Well, this is some illustrations that are coming from that work by Tsitovich et al. That I mentioned before about plasma crystals, okay? And we are wondering if it is so, if there are particular conditions in which you have a mixture of plasma and dust particles, then life, and maybe also intelligent, could exist everywhere in the universe, everywhere in the solar system, because it doesn't need air. So we don't know what life is. We think that life is carbon-based, and that's correct. We might think it's silicon-based, But these studies about this kind of plasmas are telling us, guys, be careful. They behave like DNA. Okay. So do they develop intelligence? It's funny, but I want to repropose this. It's the ancient culture is speaking about dead souls that are appearing like light bulbs. So this is funny. This is something that is the ancient knowledge. For instance, if you go to Min Min Desert in Australia, in the Boulia area, the indigenous aborigines would say these are the souls of the dead, of the wise ones, the same in so-called bodhisattva lights in somewhere in China. They think they're monks or something like that, disembodied, okay? So propelled by geophysical energy, something like a soul enter inside the plasma. Why? Well, they don't know why. Clearly, they speak by tales. But we know that if the soul is what physicists think, namely a sort of black box, okay, containing information, the soul need a quantum environment to be memorized, okay? And I will tell you now. There is a theory, which surely many of you know, it's the Penrose-Hameroff theory about quantum brain. Practically, they say that in the brain, consciousness is not born from simple electrical production inside the brain, but it's created by the microtubules. Microtubules are substantially made of tubulins, which are proteins, that have particular characteristics that make so that they are entangled together in a so-called orchestrated quantum coherence. Okay, quantum coherence means that you have many close particles that are entangled together, and they behave like a whole and not like separated particles. Okay, the theory by Penrose, in particular, Penrose is a famous, as you know, a mathematical physicist, Nobel Prize for Physics, and Hameroff is an anesthesiologist. Every time in which this wave function collapses, which is a technical way to describe a quantum state by physicists, you have a moment of consciousness. Calculations, a very simple calculation, shows that a human can have 1 million moments of consciousness every day, while an amoeba can have 1 or 2 moments of consciousness every hour. Okay, so what happens if the particles inside the plasma behave like the microtubule in the brain? If you assume that these microtubules these particles behave like the microtubules, if you have a situation of entanglement inside the plasma ball, you might, and if the theory by Penrose-Hameroff is correct, you could have consciousness moments, okay? And the more consciousness moments you have, and the more conscious and even intelligent you are, okay? It depends on the shortest time of having a consciousness moment to make you particularly intelligent. Is there some of these plasma situations that are able to do that? Well, I've been thinking about experiments, okay? And there are multiple witnesses. Anyway, I want to mention them. First of all, because they were honest people and they didn't want that their name is cited. And they told me, doctor, these lights are speaking in my mind. Okay, and not only one person, but 10 person, and they were speaking to me, telling me this. Okay, flashlights, current lights, laser beams tend to trigger reactions, an answer from this plasma ball. And the most famous of them is from Erling Strand in 1984. He aimed a red laser, quite powerful for those times, against one pulsing light balls, and it changed frequency of pulsation 8 times out of 9. Many persons hear voices in their head. Not only that, but even some scientists, physical scientists like Arlie Rutledge, during its monitoring in the late 70s in the area of Piedmont, where this kind of lights were seen very often and almost every day, he said he and his PhD students, because he was a professor, a physicist, solid state physicist, that it seemed that the phenomenon was aware of all their decision, movement, and whatever. When you have a coincidence, when you have one time situation like this, 1, 2, 3 could be coincidence. But when you have 200, then you start to think, are they reading in my mind? So is this telepathy? What is that? Or is that something? How can we demonstrate this? We cannot demonstrate telepathy because telepathy is a private thing. It's not something that we can measure. We can make some tests, yes, with, it's not my field, but you cannot measure the data that arrive in your mind, okay? As well as you cannot measure what the two particles that are linked by quantum entanglement have told to each other, because at the moment in which we make a measurement, the wave function collapses like a soap bubble, okay? So it's a very private moment, but something we can measure. And the human brain can be very important, especially with these kind of objects. Probably not only the pure plasma balls, maybe this technique, this communication is used also by flying machines. So do they affect brain activity? Well, we can measure the brain then, okay? And using an EEG. And because we want to see if there is a synchronism between the brain wave and the phenomenon, namely measuring both the brain and the phenomenon at the same time, and see what happens when we test the phenomenon or alternatively the brain, to see what has happened to the other. So the idea, the strategy, which I spoke about this at the conference Quantum Mind together with a colleague in 2007 in Salzburg in Austria, is that we take a person which is induced in a deep meditative state, so it must be calibrated. Like we have to calibrate the person, at least we have to try to do that. And this person is monitored using an EEG analyzer, electroencephalograph, clearly with all the protocols that must be used in this case, using a neuro scientist that take care of the person, considering that this is not an active injection of something in the brain, at least not in this way, but it's just passive, okay? It could be active, but I will tell you later. Meanwhile, at the same exact time, the electromagnetic field around is monitored. So microwave or VLF, ELF. We use also magnetometer in this case because we want to see not How strong is the magnetic field, like in the case that I discussed before. But we want to see if there is a magnetic perturbation at the point where we are making measurements. Then, at the same time, we monitor the phenomenon with a camera, DSLR camera, video camera, spectrograph, using optical instruments. And now the funny part is coming. We aim a laser beam to the plasma ball, and we want to see what happens to the plasma ball. Okay. At the same time, we want to see what happens to the brain. Is the brain wave changing, namely the alpha, beta, and theta state amplitude? Are they changing, or is something else happening? Clearly, we have to calibrate, we have to prepare, we have to make the same measurement with a control sample, with a person that is different, and then because there is also the emotional aspect, okay? Or conversely, suppose to use the Michael Persinger so-called God helmet and inject under neurophysiological control pulsed magnetic field in the brain. What happens to the light ball? Is there an entanglement situation? Are the two things hypothesized to be both quantum system, the brain, and the plasma ball? This is an hypothesis. It's not confirmed. Can two quantum systems can communicate in real time together? So can this demonstrate that there is really a connection between the two things? And more, is there any message that is left in the brain? This makes me think paper that was published by an American physicist, Fred Taeld, who is very old now, but I've been in touch with him, okay? And by the way, is thinking that there is a hidden entanglement between all the creature in the universe since the beginning of the universe, since the Big Bang, because in the very beginning of the universe, everything was entangled, okay, in only one particle. He thinks that this entanglement has been maintained, and sometimes it's possible to send intentionally or not intentionally messages in the brain that could, via entanglement, that once transformed into a classical state, could be measured. Analyze the brain wave using EEG, but in this case, we don't analyze the amplitude of the beta, theta, and alpha state. What we go to measure the noise. We normalize to one all these peaks with polynomial spline function that we use normally to make a calculation for calibrations, also in spectroscopy. And we focus our attention inside the noise using an algorithm like a Fourier transform, FFT or KLT, to extract a signal from the noise. Is there any signal inside the normalized brain wave or not? We could try. So, what could be the nature of intelligent plasma balls? The hypotheses are two, fundamentally. They could be something cosmic or terrestrial that is naturally produced but then evolved in something conscious, according to these theories. Or, why not? They could be technological probes or drones of extraterrestrial nature. After all, if there is a civilization, a technical civilization that is visiting us, we shouldn't be surprised that their drones are not made of metal, but they are made of plasma. and probably they are able to instruct all the particles of the plasma as probes, like drones or something like that. Whoever is interested can find a paper about this discussion, which is pre-published on my ResearchGate portal. Okay. To conclude, what can we say? We can say that apparently UAP are a manifestation of non-human intelligence, but a possible human capability to create some of them cannot be excluded. There is a huge variety of shows here, at least on the testimonial level, okay? It's a big confusion. People is seeing every kind of aliens, 70 type of aliens. How is it possible? How is it possible that Earth is so interesting, okay? We have to consider also the mind, okay? Because a person thinks to have seen a Nordic guy, but that person doesn't think that that moment it was passing very close to a 1 million volt pole that can create hallucinatory states in his mind. Okay, so we have to consider the brain also on this hallucinatory thing, which constitute the noise part of this research. In many cases, UAP show a behavior that defy, apparently, the physical laws. This presentation was dealing mostly with luminous UAP at night, where, namely, astronomy-like observational methods can be used. Plasma is hypothesized in two ways. It can be pure plasma, or it confined by a strong magnetic field surrounding a solid hull, namely a sort of spaceship or something like that. Plasma balls are only apparently supposed to be a natural phenomenon. In some cases, as I discussed, there is so-called weird life, okay? The question is if this weird life, in particular condition of quantum coherence of quantum-like conditions, okay? So they could be at all effects considered an alternative form of non-human intelligence. They could come from our planet, but they could also come from space, from everywhere, okay? Or these plasma balls are a particular kind of drone piloted by a structured non-human intelligence. So this is all what I had to say. I tried at least to say that there would be probably much more, but thank you for your attention. And I stress the importance, above all, beyond this some speculation that I made, that what is most important is to use a very rigorous measurements with the most complete set of sensors that are necessary to study this phenomena, using this research like a key project. It should be recognized in the same way in which subnuclear physics is recognized at CERN, for instance, okay, or at Stanford, or big observatories. This is something very important that could expand a lot our knowledge, not only demonstrating that we are not alone in the cosmos, but teaching us a lot of things about physics that could improve our life, in particularly make so that sheikhs somewhere in the Arab world and their petrol could have a good retirement, while we have hopefully very powerful alternative energies after testing what we learned from UAPs in a laboratory and to try to reproduce ourselves these things. So Thank you very much, and I think I finished.
Thank you very much, Massimo. That was terribly interesting. I think it really illustrates the scope of the conversation around non-human intelligence, that we aren't necessarily always looking at biological forms, and that when we do see something unusual and we do detect it, that it has a lot of different potentials in terms of what it might be.
Yes.
And I think that's really great. The other part of that struck me was studying the witness while you're studying the phenomena. I think that's really important, and I think it's novel. It's not something I've heard a lot about before. So, would you? How would you propose to develop a research project that would engage all of those at the same time? Would you do like maybe set up at the blue box and then make sure you've got EEG and those kind of things present while you're monitoring, or what?
Well, I would like, first of all, I would like to identify a certain number of so-called repeaters, those people that, for a strange reason, see the phenomenon many times. Okay, and there is one in Cape Fear River, Chris Bledsoe, for instance,
Mhm.
to check if these people is confabulating, of course, to try to select very clearly. And yes, to stay in the field with them if they see the phenomenon very often, and try to measure both the phenomenon and the person. Okay, listening to a witness to his stories can be very interesting, especially if the same thing has been seen also by other witnesses. Okay, it can guide our research, and some ufologists are very, very brave in doing that, even more brave than scientists. Okay, but I am a fanatic of the measurement protocol. So whatever cannot be measured, for me is I had a zillion UFO books, okay, and I got rid of them because they were so boring. I didn't know what to do with that. Okay, it's interesting story, but it's always the same story. Okay, what can I do with that? Okay, I am like a child. When I was a child, my parents were blaming me all the time, and so I felt that I had to do something. No, it's a duty, and so yes, I would measure their brain, but we need uh, not me, but we need a person that is specialized in that. Absolutely. Even if I did that with a person, but
Very interesting. I asked you a question some years ago about field observations and how you were able to detach yourself enough to be able to engage in taking measurements. Because a lot of us, when we're in the presence of these things, are just so overwhelmed that I remember at that place in Arizona, I remember standing there with the camera, and I never thought to even pick it up, while recurrent phenomena were right there in front of us, So maybe you could enlighten us on how you approach that.
oh yes. Well, I have to tell you that I did a report, if you remember, in 2005. I was there with Erling and with Marsha. And I can tell you, there are many photos that I analyzed, but most of them have been ascertained to be prosaic objects, okay?
Mhm.
And one in particular was really spectacular because it was one of those, airplanes that are throwing water fertilizant on the ground. And the mechanism was very interesting because it was at night. It was flying at night, illuminating the ground, and the light was reflected in the whirlpool mechanism of the water. And so it was something like a spiral UFOs that was coming from the ground, but it was explainable. There are phenomena that are prosaic, that are spectacular, but they're prosaic. But one in particular, one was maybe a flare in the sky. I was speaking with Erling. All of a sudden, there was this orange thing that came just after an F-16 was passing over our head. But another thing was impressive and shocking, because I was with a Questar telescope. Something appeared in the field, and I was looking towards the military base. I don't tell which, because I know I cannot tell. And there was something in the air, standing in the air. I thought it was a star. And me in the eyepiece, all of a sudden, boom, it fell like something instantaneous practically. So something really very strange. Why did it appear at that exact moment where I was with the telescope? Why? I was told there was a coincidence. So I started to push a shutter of my Nikon on the telescope, but incredibly the batteries had gone. But the batteries were new. And so I don't know. So that would have been the most spectacular, but I couldn't take a photo about that. So did I feel something there? I did. One day, was always with Erling and Marsha, we wanted to go to the riverbed, and the best way to go there was to bring our sleeping beds, our beds just there. And we brought them there. But at some point, there was a problem. We changed our ideas, but someone had to go to pick up back these sleeping bags of all us three. For me, it was easy to prepare my telescope, my camera, something. Instead, Erling and Marsha had to calibrate their magnetometers and VLF spectrometers, so they couldn't come with me. So I went by myself. It was about 5 o'clock, and it was the end of March. Okay, I didn't realize that I was dehydrated. Okay, even if I had a little water bottle and I had the aluminum paper with me, everything walkie-talkie, I didn't realize I was having a heat stroke. Okay,
Right.
so I telephoned Marsha, I'm feeling so and so, and she said, you have to drink a lot. I did, but I'm not feeling bad, because you don't realize that the climate is very dry. It's not heated like the one we have here in the Padana Valley. And all of a sudden, I felt something. Honestly, I thought it was an hallucination. All of a sudden, there was a breeze of cold air very close to the riverbed. I was almost arrived back, and I see on my sides two figures, very tall, taller than me, and with the white hair, a white tunic or something, like floating. I think it must have been an hallucination, but I did have that, no doubt. And this is, let's say, anecdote, okay, but I will never forget it. And when I came back from, I did quarrel a lot with Marsha, I remember. And when
Me too.
when I came back, I didn't think of the bad moments that I passed. I felt like if I were a Christian that has seen the Virgin Mary, or I don't know, I felt replenished spiritually, literally. And I don't know why.
It's a very interesting place, and I have seen light phenomena there. the row of red lights that line up on one edge of the ravine there. They kind of flash on and go out again. I've seen mobile balls of light moving through there. Just to familiarize your audience here with some of the things that have been seen there. I know Marcia has a huge amount of data, and she's a very challenging person to put it mildly. So now I'm going to turn this over to some questions from our listeners, and Chuck, why don't you take it away?
Massimo, thank you very much. That was a really information dense presentation.
Thank you.
And just for the audience like me, who's a lay person, who's not a research scientist, we will publish on humaninstitute.org a summary of this, a document, and the video will be available because there's a lot of information that you just imparted. Yeah. And so,
yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you one question before we got into the questions that have been posed by the audience.
Yeah.
So the goal here, from our point of view, is to help expand the researchers who are looking at this. And you really captured, the dilemma is gathering good data. What do you think is the key thing to expand research into this field? Money, data, interest?
It's a dilemma. The point, the first of all, is money, because we need a lot of money to get good data. And only with the good data in hand, we can try to convince our colleagues. Clearly, we have to dress ourselves like skepticals and never mention that word. Never. Simply be hidden, okay? But show the data and tell, we don't know what it is, but it behaves in this way. There is an hypothesis. So data, it means we have to produce a lot of graphs, okay? Correlation analysis, and to develop the equations that are able to describe a given behavior of a physical parameter. Telling very little, not making speculations or anything, but just showing the data. So this will shock our colleagues, and slowly, I think in the next 300 years, they will understand that it's very important to study these things. But yes, first money, then extreme rigor, very well calibrated instruments. They're using PhD students because they are very, very fleshy minds, they're very fast mathematical minds, and also full of enthusiasm. Okay, so yeah, this is what I'm thinking. Clearly, not mentioning the UFO word or something, and not participating to UFO interviews. Better not. To stay only inside the institutional ambient with those data, if we are so lucky to get to them. Yeah.
We have a lot of questions. I'm going to just sort of start at the one at the top from Reed, a guy named Reed Summers. Reed is the founder of the Human Institute, for those of you who don't know.
Yes.
Some of the speculation that NHI may have an interdimensional or quasi-physical origin is due to the physics defying capabilities and low observability of the craft. How do you reflect on these theories of origin, considering the possibility of space-time manipulation as the cause of these effects? Reed always asks these difficult questions.
No, I wouldn't think necessarily about other dimensions, which I don't exclude absolutely. I honestly have so much, I'm so confident on physics that I believe it wouldn't defy physics.
Yeah.
That
right.
if they come from other dimension, clearly their physics could be different than ours, But if they are quantum objects or quantum minds or something, and our brain is also quantum, we can communicate with them instantaneously. But we cannot measure what we communicate unless they leave something written in the EEG, in the brain wave. This is something completely new. What Summers is saying. I will consider for thinking about new speculations possibly. Anyway, it's stimulating.
Interesting stuff. Next question from Bob McGuire. Quantum entanglement is one of the descriptions and possibility of incomplete description of a higher complexity and higher dimensional tensor network. And we are seeing a lower dimensional projection. Has anyone discussed this with the project?
No, not so far.
Yeah. Next one. Kelvin, put the next one up, please. What are your theories about how plasma is powered? Is it a substrate coating around the craft, or is it the UAP made completely of plasma? And how would one gauge the sentience of plasma?
Two different mechanisms according if it is pure plasma or if it is a plasma sheet around the hull. Okay, if it is pure plasma, the only way to conceive a plasma ball is itself a strong magnetic field that is confining it, because you cannot have a pure plasma alone. It would expand immediately in a fraction of a second and not leaving for many minutes. So we have to accept something like a strong magnetic field or a possible central force. I'm speaking about the pure plasma, similar to a mini black hole that is accreting atmospheric gas and heating it, at the same time amplifying the local magnetic field, because there is a theory of magnetic flux conservation that says that when you compress matter, the magnetic lines that are inside the matter, the atoms, are amplified in intensity. So not only you would have a central force that is attracting the gas toward the center and heating it, but also you would have the creation of a magnetic cage that is able spontaneously to keep the plasma confined. Number one, this is plasma, only plasma. The other one, if it is produced by a machine, well, I would expect, first of all, we need superconducting materials. We need very high electrical currents there, something like million of volts, that is able to produce a magnetic field around the hull, and a way to capture the plasma atmospheric air and turn it into a plasma. And once done that thing, there should be some thrusters that are directional and help the objects to move to a direction or to another. So you have two different mechanisms, but in both cases, you need magnetic confinement.
Okay, Elvin, promote the next one, please. So from Dr. Pauly, how can we protect, isolate the brain functioning while approaching and when in contact with these energy fields?
This is a very good question, because it makes me think. I mentioned something to the experiments of Dr. Michael Persinger in Canada, when he was injecting a pulsed magnetic field in the brain to induce hallucinations. Okay, The only way to protect the isolated brain would be a Faraday cage, I could guess, to protect from electromagnetic interference. So we would have to create a sort of Faraday cage, or we could not use it and see what happens to the brain when it is exposed to this kind of electromagnetic field. It depends what we want to obtain. But clearly, if we want to isolate the brain and how to say, eliminate polluting noise, we need a Faraday cage.
All this seems hard because it happens so randomly. You know, how do you don't control?
You cannot control clearly, but there are some places where the phenomenon is occurring very often. So the probability that it happens going constantly for many days, okay, many hours during the night could increase. Yeah.
Okay, Kelvin, please elevate the next one. Can you speak to the potential time dilation that would theoretically take place if a warp bubble were generated? What would be the effect on a hypothetical biological entities within? Are there theoretical ways time dilation could be counteracted so entities experience normal time passage?
Okay, to this relativity question, I cannot respond because it's not I'm not a theoretical physicist, I'm an astrophysicist. I can only speak on the way of the effect this would produce outside, but not about time dilation. I cannot answer to this question. It's not my specialization.
Okay. Then the one at 957, yeah. What would be the next step in exploring the second possibility of your last slide? A plasma sheath surrounding a solid hull. What detection methods could further verify the nature of what may exist within the plasma structure?
Yes. Well, as I anticipated, this theory involves the production of an extremely powerful magnetic field that is ranging from theoretically from 10 Tesla up to maybe 1000 Tesla.
Yeah.
We humans are able to produce up to about 100 Tesla. Okay. So how to produce that? In that case, how to explore this? The best way to explore this is first of all monitoring the object simultaneously with several instruments that are sensitive to this hypothesis. Do we see strong spikes in a spectrum analyzer in the microwaves? Do we see intermittent radar disappear sometimes? You see the object, but you don't see the radar track. Okay, and above all, if the object is very luminous and we can obtain very long exposure times, then we could make a high resolution optical and infrared spectroscopy. And if we see that spectral lines are really split by the so-called Zeeman effect, by the presence of the magnetic field inside the plasma, then we can measure the entity of this splitting, which gives directly as a delta lambda the intrinsic intensity of the magnetic field. And this would give a confirmation that this mechanism is valid, in my opinion.
And then maybe the last one, and then Massimo, because you've already been talking for an hour and a half. You got to be out of gas. So last question. What is your current assessment of the most probable explanation for the intelligence behind UAP? Extraterrestrial, ETH, extratemporal, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, cyto-terrestrial, I don't even know the other. What are the strongest possible probability given the evidence we have?
This is a question of $1 million. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
who are these guys?
And I know, yeah, I don't know why it came. It's a Freudian lapsus, probably. I don't know. Well, why not adding afterlife? I don't know why. I am very interesting to add to the idea that science and physics in particular can explain the existence of an afterlife, and and without invoking God, but like a physical mechanism, like the how to say, the worm turns into a butterfly. Okay, so it's a normal evolution, it's a physical evolution, a necessary evolution. We have a consciousness. Why as everything have to finish? It's absurd. Okay, so I would ask, because I'm curious, if I have to choose, okay, I give a point. Okay, I have extraterrestrial hypothesis, I give mm, 5. Extratemporal, I give 5. Interdimensional, I give 7. Ultra terrestrial, what is the difference? I don't know between interdimensional and ultra terrestrial. It's a bit new ager. Crypto terrestrial, I might give 8. Why? Because there might be a human race that is living underground. I'm not speaking about Agartha or the hollow earth, that new age thing. But I cannot exclude that some very shy civilization have evolved independently from us, and they live inside the planet. I cannot exclude. I gave a point. Of course, I'm very interested in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I published on Acta Astronautica. In the beginning, I was a fan of that. Now I am less a fan, because when you study better the phenomenon, and when you compare to what happened to yourself, you would say, well, this thing of the Star Trek style is not convincing me very much. So this is all what I can say.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, people like you who really are at the leading edge of all this. This is historic and profoundly historic in its nature, and it changes something.
I hope so.
Assuming that this is really happening, it will change something. And the science, I really believe that you people that are doing this hard research are really laying the bedrock for all the rest of us to rely on. And so my congratulations to you, my appreciation.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for have given me the opportunity to spread something of my ideas, and I hope it triggers, even if they are wrong, they could trigger a mechanism somewhere, like the butterfly beating of the wings. It might move something somewhere. I hope so, for the well of humanity and for peace.
Me too. Me too. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Massimo.
Kelvin, maybe let's wrap this up and let us sort of just run that last bit of slide. So next slide, please. This doesn't say much. So I just wanted to remind you, 7th and 8th UAP Summit is happening. Just a plethora. Ted, you're gonna be there too, I think. A lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom. And then what you're going to see from Human Institute in the pretty near future is this UFO evidence site that's just a massive amount of data analysis around all of this. Incredible work that's being done there. I'm really eager to see it happen. And then
very happy to be in collaboration with you guys through the
no, I mean, this is really it's fabulous.
Very, very exciting. And well done, everybody, as far as putting this thing together. I'll let you wrap, I guess.
Well, two more slides. We got two more. Kelvin, next slide, please. So just to reiterate, this presentation by Massimo was in the second bullet, the signs of intelligence. We are going to track down all the way to ethics, law, and international preparedness. I mean, the goal is to influence. The goal is to influence, and this is the structure that we believe will maximize our ability to influence, to build stepwise upon this whole phenomenon. And then finally,
I think these lectures, allowing professionals and academics to speak the language of their profession to their peers, is probably the most persuasive aspect of this work.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm just so proud of these guys. I really am.
Yeah.
And then the last one, Kelvin. So that's it. Number 4 in the tank. Everybody that's here, come back to humaninstitute.org in a couple of days, and we'll have a summary with timestamps so that you can, see the major points and find them in the video without going through the whole thing. And glad you're here. Bye, everybody.
If you'd like to participate in our lecture series, or somebody that would like to participate, please go to the humaninstitute.org and take a look at the registration process.
And I forgot. And if you're a scientist and you have something to present, submit an abstract. Let us know about you. We're looking for good people, and not everybody is, a rock star with a lot of PR out there. There's a lot of good work done under the wraps of the dark of night. And so, submit your abstract. Let us know about you.
Right.
Okay, I think with that, Ted.
Thank you very much, everybody.